Welcome to this deep dive, and we're going to be looking at a really heartbreaking story that happened in Laos last November. Imagine you're backpacking, just like soaking up the sun and the culture, and then just one drink changes everything. That's what happened for the families of these 6 young travelers who died from suspected methanol poisoning. We got a bunch of news reports on this, mainly from The Guardian, and yeah, we're going to try to piece together like what happened and why this seems to keep happening in a region that's, known for these beautiful beaches and backpacker trails.
Yeah, it's truly devastating, and it really raises a lot of questions about, just the safety of alcohol, especially in places where regulations and enforcement maybe aren't as strict.
Right. So who were these travelers and what exactly happened to them?
Well, we know that there were these 2 pairs of best friends, Bianca Jones and Holly Bowles from Australia, and Frisia Venervold Sorensen and Anne-Sophie Orkeld Koyman from Denmark, along with a British lawyer named Simone White and a U.S. man. And they were all staying at this Nana Backpackers hostel in Vang Vieng, Laos. They were enjoying the free happy hour, which is a pretty common thing at hostels, especially those catering to backpackers.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that happy hour that investigators think is linked to the methanol poisoning.
Yeah, that's right. The poolside bar at the hostel has been mentioned as a possible location where they were served the contaminated alcohol, but the exact source of the methanol is still uncertain.
Right, and that must be incredibly frustrating for the families who are just desperate for answers. From what I've read, the Lao authorities haven't been very helpful with information.
Yet the lack of transparency has been a huge point of contention. Laos is a single-party communist state with a really controlled media environment. So to put that into perspective, imagine a country where the government runs all the news outlets and any kind of criticism is quickly suppressed. That makes it incredibly difficult for journalists to investigate incidents like this, and it makes it very hard for families to get a clear picture of what happened.
Yeah, it makes sense. And to add to their frustration, the hostel staff that were initially detained were released.
Exactly, and that's really fueled this deep sense of zero confidence among the families and the Lao authorities' ability or willingness to conduct a thorough investigation. And there's also the issue of the death certificates. Freyja and Anne-Sophie's death certificates just say acute heart failure, with no mention of methanol at all.
Wow. Do we think it's possible that the Lao authorities are trying to just avoid acknowledging methanol as the cause of death? Maybe to try to protect their tourism industry?
It's a fear that the families have voiced, and it's a chilling thought, because without that official recognition, it becomes much harder to hold anyone accountable for making or distributing the contaminated alcohol.
Right. And to make matters worse, autopsies couldn't be performed in Laos or Denmark because of logistical reasons. So there's this lack of concrete medical evidence, which makes it hard to definitively prove that it was methanol poisoning.
And this lack of conclusive evidence really puts the families in a difficult position. It weakens their ability to build a strong legal case, which unfortunately might be exactly what the Lao authorities are hoping for.
It's just heartbreaking to think about what these families are going through, losing their children in such a sudden and tragic way, and then facing all these roadblocks in their search for answers and justice.
Yeah, it's an incredibly complex and emotionally charged situation. These families are dealing with not only immense grief, but also a legal system that feels really opaque and unresponsive to their needs.
Right, and their response has been pretty powerful. They're calling for a boycott of Laos until a real investigation is conducted.
Yeah, it's a very strong stance, and it really shows their determination to use their platform to raise awareness and pressure the Lao authorities. It also kind of highlights the power of social media and just public pressure in these cases where traditional channels might be limited.
Right. A boycott would definitely have an impact on Laos's tourism industry, but wouldn't it also hurt the local businesses who didn't have anything to do with this tragedy?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's a tough balance to strike. On one hand, you want to hold the people responsible accountable and prevent this from happening again. But on the other, you don't want to punish innocent people or hurt the livelihoods of those who rely on tourism.
Right. This tragedy really shines a light on a bigger issue, the prevalence of methanol poisoning in Southeast Asia.
Exactly. This isn't just an isolated incident. Methanol is a cheap and readily available substitute for ethanol, and it's often found in bootleg liquor, which is unfortunately pretty common in some parts of Southeast Asia.
Right, and the consequences can be deadly. What's really scary is that a lethal dose of methanol can be as small as just one mouthful.
Yeah, think about that for a second. Just One sip of contaminated alcohol could be fatal. It's a sobering thought, and it really shows how important it is to be informed and make responsible choices when traveling.
Absolutely. It's estimated that up to a third of the alcohol consumed in Laos is illicit. And Doctors Without Borders has been tracking suspected methanol deaths in the region since 1998, and they estimate over 14,000 cases. Those numbers are just staggering.
Yeah, it suggests a systemic problem, and it makes you wonder why this is happening. Is safe, locally produced alcohol just too expensive or inaccessible for a lot of people? Is there not enough awareness about how dangerous methanol is? These are complex issues that need to be addressed on a societal level.
Yeah, they really do. Laos does have laws that could be used to prosecute those responsible for producing this deadly methanol, but there's a lot of uncertainty about how often those laws have been enforced in the past.
And that lack of clarity around enforcement really adds to the family's distrust. If there's no consistent history of holding people accountable, it makes sense why they would be skeptical about whether justice will be served in this case.
Yeah, it's understandable. It's easy to get lost in the legal and logistical complexities of this case, but we can't forget that at its heart, this is a human tragedy with real people who have lost loved ones.
Absolutely. Each family has a unique story of loss and grief, and they're all dealing with this in their own way. Mark Jones, Bianca's father, has been very vocal about wanting accountability. He believes that by holding those responsible accountable, they can prevent others from doing these dangerous things and potentially save lives.
Right. Holly's father, Sean Bowles, has also expressed his lack of confidence in the investigation. And Karsten Sorensen Friese's father is specifically worried that his daughter's death won't even be officially linked to methanol because of what's written on the death certificate.
It's a really haunting thought that even in death, their daughters might not be accurately represented, and those responsible might get away with it.
It's a lot to process, so much tragedy and uncertainty and so many unanswered questions. This really makes you think about your own travel experiences. Have you ever been in a situation where you question the safety of the alcohol? What did you do?
Oh, yeah. I remember one time I was backpacking through Southeast Asia and someone offered me a drink, and it just looked and smelled kind of off. And my gut just told me to say no thanks, and I'm really glad I did. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of traveling and let your guard down, but it's really important to trust your instincts, especially when it comes to something like alcohol.
Right. We talk a lot about doing research before traveling, but yeah, sometimes it really does just come down to that gut feeling in the moment. So what are some red flags people should watch out for when it comes to alcohol that might be dangerous?
Well, one of the most obvious things is the price. If it's way cheaper than what you'd normally expect to pay, it could mean that they use cheaper ingredients, which might be dangerous. Also pay attention to how it smells and looks. If it has a weird odor or color, it's probably best to just avoid it. And trust your gut. If something feels off, don't feel like you have to drink it.
Yeah, that's good advice. So much of this really comes down to personal responsibility and awareness.
For sure. We can't just rely on regulations and enforcement to protect us. We need to be informed and proactive about our own safety. This whole case really shows that even in a world that feels so connected, there are still big differences in legal systems and safety standards around the world.
Yeah, it's a really tragic story with a lot of implications. This deep dive has been really informative, but honestly, it's been emotionally heavy too.
Yeah, I get that. It's hard not to feel for these families who've been through so much. But even with all the tragedy, their strength and determination to find answers and prevent this from happening to others is really inspiring.
Yeah, it really is. And that brings us to our final thought for you today. What are some concrete steps travelers can take to protect themselves from methanol poisoning, especially when they're in countries where there might be a lot of bootleg alcohol?
I'd say do some research online. There's a lot of information out there. There are some good resources that give tips on how to spot potentially dangerous alcohol, what questions to ask, and what precautions to take. Knowledge is power, and in this case, it could literally save your life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a good reminder to stay informed, trust your instincts, and make smart choices when we travel. Stay safe out there and keep exploring the world, but do it with open eyes and a cautious heart.